And the reason for that, the wars continually take place, is the human life is only about 70 years. So generally the mind will not go back beyond that 70 years. They'll go back in their own small, tiny little lifetime and think, yeah, let's go in, let's bomb them, let's solve this problem. And of course, the older you get, you begin to realise that bombing anyone to pieces is no solution to anything. So that was the reason that was written. And again, the second book, which is a follow-up to this book, I know a couple of you guys have read it, but follow-up to that book is it's a much deeper, probably a little bit more in tune book than the first one, because the first one was written really, really very, very quickly. So that's me. So how did this idea of zoomanity come into play? Well, maybe it might be better if I share a small story with you, because it all began with a window. This was in 2007, and at this particular time, I'd been separated from my wife, and I was going through a divorce. And I had to sleep for a small period of time in the loft of my parents' house. So it was in one of these rooms that were like this, and if you sat up, you cracked your head. And every time I woke up in the morning, although the room was dark, in fact, when you came out of the bed, you had to get out of the bed like this, and there was a beam, a supporting beam, like, the A-frame to the building. Supporting beam, so you had to go under or over the beam to get out of the bedroom. So in the morning, I would wake up, and I would look out a small window. So this particular morning, I was awoken by a load of noise. So I looked out the window, and it was the bin men. So I was just sat at this window, and obviously I've been going through a lot myself, so I was in this period of thought. And this happened day after day, week after week, month after month. The same routine was these guys would all go in the morning, they'd get their bin, and they would go to the front like this, and they would stop on the boundary of the driveway. And they would get their bin, and they would do this with the bin. So the bin would just be just right. And I used to think, God almighty, what is going on? And then the same thing as well, people would do the same thing every single day. They'd take the dog for a walk, they'd stop, they'd do something else. Everybody was doing the same thing on a routine. So every time I looked out this window, I thought, there is something wrong. There is something wrong. Because on this housing estate where my parents live, there's also a guy who I grew up with in our punk rock days. This guy I grew up with called Spud. His name was Mike. And every now and again I would see Spud as I went for a walk. And he was 2 years younger than me. But his hair was white, his skin was grey, and he also had huge rings around his eyes. His belly was getting bigger, and he was becoming more crumpled. And every time I used to see Spud, I used to say, how are you doing? He used to go, yeah, it's okay, yeah. How's the job going? God, I can't wait to retire. I'm really looking forward. And the more I spent time on the estate with my parents, I thought, God, something is wrong. Somebody has told someone that this is the best way to live. But actually, the life had become existence rather than life. So we had to think about what's the definition of life and what's the definition of existence. And it was almost as if, I'm going to try and stick to these so I'll give you some sense of, because I do go all over the place. It was almost as if their minds had been controlled remotely. And the more I thought about this whole idea of this control over the mind, which of course is nothing new in control over the mind, the more I thought about this whole idea of the control over the mind, the more I thought about this, is just something has taken place at some point within humanity that has taken a human being and turned this human being into something different. Because certainly what you see is not a human being. So what was actually taking place? Were people under some kind of invisible control? Am I, under some kind of invisible control? It was certainly a question worth asking, because people were certainly, and still are, acting, reacting, participating, anticipating, doing all their daily chores, weekly chores, monthly chores, in a way that appears to be almost robotic. So is this something invisible? Something invisible that's created something else. So because of where I was in my life at that particular time, I decided to disappear, jump on a plane, and I went and lived in the mountains in California for a few months while I thought about this whole concept. And I thought about this dream life that we are all told is the best way to live. Now, I've had everything, and I've lost everything, and I've got everything I need today. And I know life is easy when we have the things that we need. And the things, if you don't have money, life is not easy, is it? If you can't go to the shop today and buy your shopping, you're in trouble. If you can't pay your bills, the pressure and the stress starts to build and build and build. So what is this dream? This fantasy dream? And I thought about this dream and where it came from. And I thought about this illusion that people have been given, that this is the best way to live your life. Is it an illusion? Is it a dream? Or was I the one having the illusion and having the dream at that time? And of course this creates dependence. And who says what, who says when, who says how, who says when to jump, do we jump? So I thought more about this dream. So the dream is kind of built on a construct, and the construct is as simple as this. We bring our children up, we tell them to get educated, we give them the education, we tell them to get a good job, we tell them to get promoted in the job, we tell them to build wealth, we tell them it's good to get a bigger and better car, a bigger and better house, and we tell them to change the things that they really want. But the problem is, what we want usually isn't what we need. Is it? I mean, every time I see this Bugatti going past my house, I always say to her, I said, oh God, I really want that. And she says, darling, do you need it? I said, well, no, I don't really. So our wants and needs are different. I need a car, but I want one of these monsters that drive past. So the wants and the needs are different. So this dream creates this illusion that life is built on these things. And we see this filtrated all the way through society, through all the different areas of society, and through all the things that we tell our young people. So I'm going to explain the Zoom in a minute, but so basically this is the zoomanic trance. The trance applied by the Zoom into zoomanity, which veneers the whole of humanity. It's an narrow vision, wealth is happiness, riches happiness, and it's all about consumption for the consumer. How much can a consumer consume? How much can a consumer actually consume? I don't know about you guys, but how much stuff do you put in your wheelie bin every single day? Where does this stuff come from? We're taking these huge bags down to the wheelie bin. We say, I took one down yesterday, where's this one come from? And apart from that, all the other things. How many mobile phones can you have? How many iPads? How many computers? We're continually fed this. You need to get version 1, version 2, version 3, version 7. When there's a new iPhone coming out, my son, my eldest boy, texts me and said, Dad, are you watching the Apple stream online? I said, what's happening online with Apples? He said, no, it's the Apple launch. There's a new iPhone, there's going to be a new golden tablet. And he's only had his new iPhone 6 for a few months, and he will trade it in for the next iPhone 6. Because it's the consumption of the consumer that is fed by the illusionists who create the dream. Does it equate to happiness? Never. Very, very rarely. So life as a Zoom is very simple, which we'll talk about in a second. Existence replaces life. We live, we die, we question nothing, we accept everything we're told. We just accept everything we're told. But why is that? Maybe you don't accept everything you're told. Maybe I do accept everything I'm told. But the question is, do we question the question? Do we question the things that we are told not to question? I told you I'm no good with slides. I'm not going to do the slides. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. It's all going to be a conversation. So, the zoo. I had this idea when I was in California and I was hanging out with a bunch of hippies. We were at the top of the mountains, a place called Bonnie Doon. And it was cool. It wasn't quite my thing, but it was quite cool. I've been a fundamentalist minister for 20 years, which was pretty hardcore. Knocking on doors, speaking to people, talking about every kind of religion you can think of, you know, and talking about faith and going to meetings and all this stuff. I've been through all this chaos and I just wanted to breathe and just hang out with some people, really, who were just hanging out and living life. So I ended up in Bonnie Doon, and I kept thinking about this thing in the zoo, which was the idea that I got for Zoomanity, after I watched The Truman Show, the movie. If you haven't seen The Truman Show, the movie, watch it. But it reminded me of looking through the window at my parents' house. So, I don't know if you know this, an elephant will live on average 17 years in a zoo. But in the wild, it will live 53 years. So I thought, well, what's the difference? So we take our kids to see the wild animals in the zoo, but the truth is there's no wild animals in the zoo. They're just animals that have had the wild removed. So they go from 17 years in the zoo, but 53 years when they're wild. But the zookeepers think about this very carefully. They do think about it very carefully, and they want to look after the animals. So think, what do the animals need? Okay, let's give them an enclosure with grass. Let's give them water. Let's try and replicate their food systems. Let's give them some other elephants to hang out with. Let's give them the meat and the apple and everything else. And whatever we cannot give them through their food to give them a wonderful life, we'll give them some kind of pharmaceutical of some kind. That's what they do. And then you can Google this or research this. So they'll give them something to top it up. So the wild animal becomes, I don't know, is it even an animal? I mean, it's certainly thrilling when you take the children to the zoo and see an elephant, or you see the gorilla. It's certainly a thrill. But the fact is the wild has been taken away. What happened to the human being? What has happened to the human being? Has the human been replaced by the zooman? Are human beings now given everything? Are we given everything? Through the systems, through the centuries, through the millenniums, are we given everything to keep us in existence? Because if you keep, you see these guys on TV and the guys in the lion enclosure, and he's playing with the lions, and you're thinking, God, that guy's going to get eaten alive. But actually, he knows he's not going to get eaten alive because the animals have already eaten. And the animals are totally dependent on the keeper. So he knows the state they are in. So really, with humanity becoming zoomanity and becoming veneered, being covered over completely by zoomankind, by the zookeepers, the human leaves the human being. So what a real human would really need and want becomes something that the consumption, the consuming, all-consuming zoomanic empires throughout the whole of history and throughout the whole of mankind, we depend on what they give us. So we are totally dependent. How many of us now could go and just live and survive on our own? I always have this saying, I've gone through like a really mental divorce where I was left with not even 1 pence in the bank, completely nothing whatsoever. I always have this thing where I always say, if somebody sat me naked in that field, that's fine. I would survive, I'd be okay. Because you can start again. But the truth is, we are quite dependent. So maybe I'm telling a little bit of a lie because I was dependent on my parents, and they were dependent on the system, which gave me safety during that period. So, what has happened to the human beings? Just a little thing, I've done quite a lot of travelling, and every time I meet people who live in a more natural system, for example, a long time ago, 2009 or 2008, I went into the Amazon jungle. spent 2 weeks with the Achuar Indians. And the Achuar Indians were very, very interesting because everything that I thought about life, they challenged everything. It was completely challenged. Because one, I wake up and I break my fast, I have my breakfast. I stop around 12 o'clock and I have my lunch. We stop about 4 or 5 o'clock and we prepare for dinner. And then in the evening, when we're getting really tired and a bit lazy and sloppy, we have a little snack, and then you go to bed about 10 or 11 and read a book or whatever. These guys, who've never even experienced, have never seen a car, never seen anything like this, it's completely different. They go to bed when the sun goes down, and they wake up when the sun rises. They eat when they catch food. They drink when they have liquid to drink. So the whole concept of human life, for me, I was like, God, wow, that's incredible. And of course, it was an ayahuasca tribe. So it was a dream-based culture, which really means that the first thing they did in the morning, I'll just tell you very quickly, the first thing they did in the morning, when they all rose from the big hut, and the big hut was fascinating because they buried the dead in the hut. So the big hut in the middle, which is probably the size of this room actually, to be honest, not as wide, had a couple of mounds and then a couple of sunken bits, and they just walk over it. And that's where people have been buried. They bury them inside the hut. So almost everything you think of, and I'll tell you, when we all arrived in this tribe, they don't have fresh water. I forgot what the stuff's called now, but they give you this drink which is made from the roots of a tree and spit. So what they do is they chew this root, which makes them really salivate, and they'll spit into this bowl. And then they scoop some of the spit out and they give you some of the spit to drink, which actually tastes a little bit like cider. Has like an unusual taste to it. So it was a completely different concept for me personally, for human beings. But I did think to myself, actually, is this how human beings, I'll be honest, I don't want to live in a jungle and I don't want to live in a hut and I don't want to live in mud and everything else. But I thought, is that closer to the human being than what we have today? Because one thing's for sure, every empire crumbles. And why does it crumble? It crumbles from the inside out. Not from the outside in. Some empires crumble from the outside in, but they are very unusual. You just have to look back on history. And it wouldn't be surprising for me, I'm sure it would be surprising for you, if eventually at some point in the future, maybe not in our lifetime, the USA completely disappears. Why would it not? Where's Babylon? Where's Assyria? Where's Greece? Where's Egypt? You know, where's Russia? The USSR, I should say. Where are these great places? Where are the Romans? I've never once seen a Roman walking around Chester. Never. The great Roman city that everybody, I have mates coming from different places in the world and say, take me to Chester, that's where all the Romans are. I'm like, God, I've never seen a Roman there. It's full of Scousers. And Gary lives in Chester. So the Zookeepers, basically the rulers of mankind, give us what they think we want. But the truth is, who decides what we want? Because the bigger consciousness is continually fed by something out of your control and out of my control. So who feeds and who compounds those thoughts into our minds on a daily basis? Who feeds the animals in the zoo on a daily basis? Who gives the animals what they need to survive? Who gives the zooman what they need on a daily basis to survive? Some thrive, some prosper, some die. But who gives us all that stuff? So the cage, the zoomanic cage that we are living in, is almost like, you can imagine you put an animal in a cage. It's been there for 10 years. You've probably seen it on the documentary. I was watching a little thing on TV the other week called Monkey Island or Monkey Zoo or something, Monkey something. And these guys travel all over the world to rescue apes from cages. And they went to this country and there was an ape in the corner of this cage. and it'd been there for 20 years. Now, although they opened the door of the cage, it wouldn't come out. And although they tried to drag this monkey out of the cage, it would not come out. So what they had to do is they had to knock the monkey out, make it completely unconscious, drag it out of the cage, throw it in a box, and put it on the plane. Then when they got to Monkey Zoo, or Monkey Island, or whatever it's called, when they got to this place in England, down South Herefordshire, when they got there, they put the monkey, they rehabilitated the animal in the cage, and they eventually allowed it to go into the share cage with one monkey, and then a couple of monkeys, and put it into the compound. But it still did not want to go out. Why is that? Because the cage is designed to mentally incapacitate the animal and the human. So the real question is, what really mentally incapacitates us? What tells us that we cannot do something, or we cannot change things? Because that is part of our cage. That is part of the zoomanic construct, which tells you that you are unable to do X, Y, Z. So, for example, some people will say, well, it's okay for him. You know, it's okay for him. But it's not okay for him, because whoever him is, he's had to get out of the cage and do something about it. Or you see somebody in a terrible relationship. Why won't they leave that relationship? Because that relationship is their cage. And the cage gives them some safety. And it composes them. And it holds them. And regardless of how many times they're being punched, they still have to think about, shall I leave? Because the Zooman has been trained to believe change is impossible. It's designed to deceive at a level so brilliantly clever, you will never see the deception in a million years unless you wake up. It's not possible to see it. If you are one of the comatose or one of the sleeping, you won't see anything. If you're one of the deaf, you'll hear nothing. If you're one of the blind, you wouldn't see anything. But this is people with ears, people with eyes, and people who can smell things, but they see nothing. But is it their fault? No, not really. It's a zoomanic pattern that's endlessly repeated throughout the whole of humanity. So, the mass controls the mass. So it's almost like, you remember 9/11? Well, it's a stupid question, but on the day of 9/11, could you feel that day, the mass of mankind? You felt it, didn't you? I certainly did. I certainly felt it. You could feel, I'm not sure what it was, but you could feel the mass all come together as one, locked together in hate, in disgust, in everything you can think of. Every possible human emotion that could be touched on that day, it was touched. And nobody wanted to go to the toilet because they wanted to keep watching. Nobody wanted to eat because they couldn't move away from the TV. And the whole of the mass of humankind that saw it, we were so tightly bound together. So tightly bound together. And Zoomanity is no fool. Zoomanity knows how easy it is to combine and pull together the mass of humankind. It's not rocket science. You know, the Romans did it, right? Where did the gladiatorial combat come from? Thought, this will keep the people happy. Let's create this new game. Let's do this thing. It'll keep them happy. And one day, one of them shouts, "Kill him!" To one man shout, "Kill him!" So the emperor went. And then it really started then. The rot from the inside had really begun. The decomposition of the whole of the Roman Empire had really begun at big time at that point. So, the authorities, and don't get me wrong, I'm not completely anti-authority at any level, but what I'm saying is, do we question enough of everything? Or do we just accept almost everything? Do we just accept almost everything? It's like all this, when I was writing I Am Bastard, I Am War, I was so like, I felt so in the middle of everything. I felt as if I was sitting, what started off, there was a kid in the press, and Syria was completely destroyed. And on one street, she was sat there, and she was probably about 10. Remember that photograph? And she was selling bread. In the middle of this total annihilation, complete and utter Armageddon in Syria. And then on the next street, they were killing each other, shooting each other, but this kid was still sat there selling bread. And I thought, God, what happens to the human being at such a level that that's okay? That is actually okay. And really, if you look at any problem within humanity, if you reverse engineer any problem, you reverse engineer any thought, anything you see, you can easily go back to the origin of the problem. It's easy. One man, one woman, they give birth to a child. They give birth to another child. Then they create a family. The family becomes a tribe. The tribe becomes a nation. And then conflict begins to take place within that nation. But the conflict is situated, it's seated within that one nation. So they take the wrongdoer and they throw him outside the nation. And 1,000 years down the line, do you think his tribe and nation have forgotten that problem? I mean, Israel and Palestine, they're still talking about, well, when Jesus was around and when Moses was around, this is what they did to us. You're 3,000, 4,000 years ago. They're still going all the way back here. So tribal thinking, zoomanic thoughts, never change. It doesn't change. But does that mean it's okay? Does that mean it's okay? Would you take all those guys from ISIS and say to them, let's build our own utopian empire? How can you take a group of people involved in such destruction to then build a utopian empire? Is it possible? I don't believe it's possible. I don't believe it's possible. But we should be questioning everything. If you can remember just at the beginning of that Syrian conflict, what were the Americans saying? Let's go on and bomb these. Let's bomb them. Let's just bomb them. That'll sort the whole problem out. And do you remember the Russians said, if you go in there and start bombing them, there'll be a problem. Now actually, would it have been right to bomb them at the time? Well, I don't know. I don't have the answers. But what I am saying is, do we question enough? Has the zoomanic trance got us at a level where everything that comes through the media, everything that comes through the press, everything that comes through the radio is okay? It's okay. I don't know how you felt when they showed. I'm not judging anything here. So this is just my thinking moving through. I'm talking about a feeling I had. When they dragged Saddam Hussein and tied the rope around his neck and threw him off that little balcony. Is it okay to really show somebody being hung on TV like that? And the whole of the nation and the world cheering? He was a bad man. Of course he was a bad man. But there's lots of bad people in this world who create utter chaos. Aren't we seeing, and I'm not a conspiracist at any level, but are we seeing the Americanization of the whole of the globe? Are we seeing that? Are we seeing the implementation of American democracy, American consumerism, American ideas? But there's nothing new in that. I mean, you know, if in 1,000 years we'd be going, oh my God, the Americans were brilliant. They built roads, they gave us computers, they gave us internet and Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg. That's what people will be saying. Because today we're saying, God, the Romans were great, they gave us flushing toilets, central heating, they gave us roads. Napoleon was the first guy who said, when you build a road, do not put a bend in it. I want to get there. The Romans from London, the original road from London to, I can't remember if it was Chester, it may have been, was a straight road. They created a straight path, straight ahead. Every great nation does something incredible. I mean, I don't know how useful a pyramid actually is in daily life, but it was a pretty brilliant accomplishment to build those pyramids. It was a pretty incredible thing that they did. You know, and all the things that the Ninevites, the Assyrians, all these great nations. We read a book called One Click Nation. which was all about Israel from 1948 onwards. Startup Nation. It's an incredible book. It's an incredible book. Because they've been given their land, and they were told, this is where thinking outside ZOOMANITY, they were told they couldn't do this. And there was it 100,000 people or something? They gave their people an invitation, all the Jews. Said, anyone who wants to come here, you come here, you've got a passport today. And they made everything so easy. I would just advise you read the book because it's quite inspiring. So there's a story in there of 2 young boys from Ethiopia, Jewish boys, who walked from Ethiopia all the way to Israel to get the passport and have a brand new start in life. It's an incredible book, but what it shows really is, every nation does good things. The Zoomanic philosophy leaves a stamp on mankind, which is good. I know I like my life as easy as possible, and we just moved house, and unfortunately we couldn't get our new sofas because we got an apartment. We couldn't get our sofas, which I love these sofas. We couldn't get them up the stairs. So we're sitting on this little sofa, which is terrible. So I do like good things, and I do like nice things, I like comfortable things. So there's nothing wrong with that. But what we're talking about is the Zoomanic being these days. Look at how we're feeding our children. Some of the biggest shows on TV, soap operas. Reality, there's nothing real about reality TV. There's nothing real about reality TV in the slightest. We're having, 15, 16-year-olds who want breast implants. They're wanting their lips pumped up. It's crazy. I don't even need to explain that stuff to you. You've seen what's taking place. It's crazy what we're feeding these young people. And is it getting any better or any worse? I don't know. But what we do have to do is we have to question what we feed into our humanity rather than following the veneered Zoomanity. So who is it that's teaching us this stuff? Who is it within the zoo that teaches us this stuff? Because if your mother and father had taught you from being a child that this is the best way for you to live your life, does that mean that they have lied to you all their life? Does that mean they have deliberately corrupted you, deliberately turned you into some kind of android, some kind of drone, some kind of sheep, some kind of follower of nothing, a dreamer and a schemer following an illusion? Or did they try and make you the best possible human being that they could ever produce? Well, of course they did. That's what they did. But the problem with parents are a little bit like teachers. We just repeat what we've been told. And some of the things that we repeat, that we have been told as we've grown up, some of them are not true. Now, I do like to question everything. I like to question everything I can in life. If something doesn't feel right. So for me, I know it's a sensitive subject for some people, but evolution. I'm not sure if we were created, but I'm not sure where we came from. But I certainly don't believe in evolution, because there's too many questions. And evolution is taught as a fact. Yeah, even in the schools, they still call it the theory of evolution. It's not called the fact of evolution. They don't teach the fact of creation either. The theory of creation. What's the truth? I'm not really sure. But what I do know is I was brought up at school, drawing apes turning into people. And, centipede turning into a giraffe. It doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't make any sense. And as you get older, once you've been taught those things, if somebody challenges, I had this conversation with someone the other week, and I said, oh God, no, I don't believe in evolution. And she went, oh my God, you don't believe in evolution? I said, well, you explain evolution to me. So the giraffe at one point had a short neck. It couldn't reach the top of the trees. So it thought, okay, I'm going to grow my neck as long as I can, then I can get to the top. Does that make sense? It just doesn't make sense to me. Some animals have hollow bones, like the birds. Some animals have solid bones, like lions or whatever. So how can a solid-boned animal develop hollow bones and begin to fly? There's so many questions that didn't make sense, made no sense whatsoever. And as time's gone on through the years, you know, another little thing I found out was, if Jesus hadn't been born at Christmas, when was he born? And if he wasn't born at Christmas, where did Christmas come from? I thought it was a reasonable question. I said to my dad, I said, Dad, I read this thing that Jesus was born around October. He said, don't be stupid. I said, well, if he was born around October, and according to this, he was, what is Christmas? He said, well, it's Jesus' birthday. And I did more research, and found out it came from a pagan festival called Saturnalia, which was all to do with the equinox and all that kind of stuff. And the name was changed because the nation had become Christian instead of pagan. They said, all right, you can keep this one. We want to get rid of all these fake gods, but you can keep this one and we'll have a party and we'll call it Jesus' birthday. Now, I'm not saying if that's right or that's wrong. That's up to you, that's up to me. But the truth is, what do we question? Because everything we're told as accurate, is it actually true? I don't know about all these conspiracy theories to do with 9/11. I just haven't got a clue, to be honest. I have watched some of those videos, but something doesn't seem quite right, does it? Or does it? Do we just accept it, and we accept the mess that came from that? Do we just accept a complete and total mess as, it's fine, we're just putting all these Islamists and everybody else back in their place, we're going to sort the world out itself? It doesn't quite ring true, does it? I remember years ago when I bought my very first house in 1985, I was told that this endowment mortgage would change my life. So I thought, well, that's cool, I'm going to have more money at the end of this mortgage than I've got now. And the house was 14.5 grand, this first house. So I thought, yeah, so 14.5, and this woman was saying, okay, so your house is 14.5 grand. I reckon you'll be able to sell this house for X, Y, Z, and you'll probably have double to go and buy a flat in Bendor or something. So I thought, oh God, that's so cool. I'm going to be really rich. It's got a few years away, but it's going to be really good. And what suddenly starts to happen? When I sold those endowment mortgages, one of them I'd had for something like 16, 17 years, it was worth about £400. God knows how much money I put into this endowment. I remember I had 3 at the time. So I just traded them in because they just weren't worth anything. How many things are we told through the zoomanic system, which is supported in this consumptive society, that makes us think that this is the best way to live our life? When actually, do we question, is this what's best for me? I mean, me personally, you know, I've been through a few dramatic periods, but I am a bit of a drama queen, I have to say. Is that true? So, when I was an ordained minister, I started to think to myself, this is not working for me. Because I started to see things, and I started to work out things for myself, it didn't make sense. One of the things I used to think about is, it's a little question like with the dinosaurs. Now, where were the dinosaurs in the stream of time? There's a big gap between these animals and human beings. I mean, millions of years gap between human beings and these dinosaurs. Where did dinosaurs come from? Were they created? Did they evolve? Why was man created? And then I started to see, well, saw quite a bit of hypocrisy within the organisation that I was involved with. So I had to started to challenge everything. I started to question anything. And I realised, looking back, that I had built my own cage. And this cage was so powerful, I was terrified of stepping outside. I thought, oh my God, if I step outside, have I just thrown away my salvation? If I stay inside, I hate myself, I hate being alive. If I step outside, I'm going to lose all the pals and everything else. If I stay inside, I'll still be approved by God. But the bottom line was, I was born, I was living, and at some point I was going to die. And at that point in time, over a few years, I was desperately unhappy. But the zoomanic system had already taught me, don't you question anything. You create your invisible cage without even thinking. You create that cage, And that cage becomes your barrier, your boundary, your trap until the day you die. Outside my writings and stuff, I still do a lot of consultancy business. And one of the biggest things I see in business that people always say, well, I can't do that. Well, of course you can do it. I mean, you read the almost ridiculous story of Richard Branson setting up Virgin Airlines. The guy is trapped on an island with a load of people. The planes have been cancelled. He really wants to get home, and so does everybody else. So he's thinking, you know what, there's 250 people here. If I rent a plane and get the plane to come over and split the cost of the plane between these 250 people, the plane's paid for and I can get home. That's how it began. There was no constraint within the guy's thinking at that time. So if you got on the phone, he said, hi, I'm stuck on, I've got the island, I'm stuck on this island, I really need to get home, I want to, what do they call it when you hire a charter? I want to charter a plane. Oh, so you want a 2-man plane? Oh, it's for 300 people. When as soon as you said, well, we can get there in 18 hours, but I need the money, we need the money to book it. He said, fine. So he put a piece of cardboard paper, blah, 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 blah. Anybody who wants to fly back to London right now, it's £272, I can charter a plane and we'll all be home. And that's how Virgin Airlines began. It's an incredible story because it shows the boundaries and the barriers and the restrictions, even at a working level, can be completely smashed. But it's up to you. So the real question is, who controls you? Because there's more risk in taking no risk in anything in life. If you're in a relationship that you absolutely, you just want to die. You're just had enough, you want to die. Well, the good news is you will die at some point, and you'll die pretty miserable. If you're in a job that makes you feel like, I just want to die, why are you in the job? Because it's the repetition and the mantra and the trance of ZOOMANITY saying, you must do this. You stay in line, you walk with the mass, you do as the mass tells you to go. The mass will all sway at once. The mass will all move in one direction at once. It's a little bit like standing outside Wembley and 30,000 people come out and you're going to say, I am not moving. And this crowd is coming towards you, this mass of ZOOMANITY are racing towards you, and you're going, I'm not moving, I'm not moving. And one or two start to bang you, and before you know it, you're being carried by the mass. So really escaping from ZOOMANITY at a personal level is not easy, because the mass will always want you to conform. When I stopped being a hairdresser, I said to my family, I don't want to be a hairdresser anymore, I hate it. I hated it towards the end, because it made my back very, very sore. That was the #1 problem. And to be honest, I just had enough of doing the job, to be honest. I was busy doing other stuff and I wanted to move on. And all my family said, are you completely insane? You've got 3 salons. You built this, I built this beautiful 5 bedrooms, converted barn. I had an acre's garden, I had a big orchard, I had a big shed that you could sit in there and hang out and, you know, smoke a pipe or whatever you wanted to do. It was just nice, really, but I was so desperately unhappy. But every single person in my family completely opposed it. Completely opposed it. Said, you're totally nuts. And within a month of selling everything and moving into my new career, which was writing, I was in a better position than I'd ever been for decades, really. But, like I say, there is more risk than not taking risk. I don't want to get to the end of my life and go, God, that was crap. Wish I could do it all again. I don't want to do that. And I remember one time when I was with my father, I think he really hates me telling this story, but it's absolutely true. When I was really in a really big mess, this divorce was insane. I was being dragged into bankruptcy through all these mental people. It was completely nuts, and I was like, I thought I was going to die, to be honest, at the time. I was really having real serious problems at this time. So my dad said, let's go for a walk on the beach, and what you have to understand about my dad is he doesn't really speak. So he doesn't really say anything. So my dad was, when he was a child, I've thought about this regularly in the past. When he was a child, his mother ran off at the circus, and his dad just ran off. So he was brought up by his grandparents. So my dad, who was called James Smith, was always known as James Bogey, because we're from Scotland and Bogey is a very Scottish name. So he was always known as James Bogey. So my dad always tells the story, he said, well, when I was growing up, I never knew if I was James Smith or James Bogey. So I always found it a little bit confusing. And it always created that confusion. And he said, although I grew up in a really big, beautiful, loving family, I always knew I wasn't one of the sons. So I think from my father, I always had that distance for him, that barrier with everything. And it's always been reflected in his own life. So I'm telling you that just to show you where he came from. And just to highlight the fact he doesn't really say a lot. So we went for a walk along the beach in the Lake District, because my parents had moved up there for a while. And we had the big dogs, and as we were walking along the beach, my dad said to me, he said, you know what? He said, if my life was a book, he said, the last 30 years would be blank pages. And I swear that stuck with me like a stamp, like a stamp, a word chiseled into a piece of solid granite. I just thought, wow, God. But when I said to him, why did you do that, Dad? Well, I wanted to give you a lot better life, and I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do that. But he could have done so much more, because he's a really brilliant guy, as is my mother. But he got trapped within this fear, this zoomanic fear of stepping outside. And towards the end of life, not only did they hate each other, they hate everything. They just hate everything. Everyone. Everything. Bitter about everything. Imagine getting to the end of your life and going, God, that was horrible. I just want to die. Because the truth is, who wants to die? Nobody wants to die. There's something so deep inside us that tells us life is a better option. There's something that tells you that life is always the first choice, not death. So the repeaters just repeat. Because the repeaters don't question anything. And the repeaters are trained by the zookeepers. And the zookeepers are the managers, the fund and trust managers of humanity. That's who the repeaters and the zookeepers are. They have nothing to say about anything. It's discussed in the room. How are we for time? 10 past 8. So they just repeat everything without question. We're going to have to move on. That's why I don't like doing the slides. So the real question is, who controls you? Who controls you? I think it's a good question to ask yourself. So the question that I have to ask myself is, what do I read every day? What do I watch every day? What do I listen to every day? Because it has a compounding effect on the mind. It has a compounding effect on the mind to the point that you believe it's true. And sometimes we're told things are true that are not true. And it's only 10 years, 5 years later, we find out, God, I actually believed that when it was happening. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what are these, you know what a mantra is, don't you? You know, we've all seen it, you know, done a bit of Buddhism or yoga or whatever, all kinds of things where we're all doing these mantras and why do we do the mantra? Well, a mantra is the same as doing our times table at school. Okay, gang, 1 and 1 is 2, 2 is 2 is, I got lost after 6 and 6 is whatever. But that's a mantra at school, right? Why do we do that? Because it compounds the thought. It solidifies a thought. That's the point I'm trying to say. It solidifies a thought. Helps us to learn, helps us to educate us. And it teaches us the mantras that we get. Here's an interesting one. Controversial for some people. I don't care. It's just a thought. It's just a question of something. So, I'm probably talking about this because I've just finished I Am Bastard, I Am War. This new piece I've written. So, what actually is the war on terror? And who is actually creating the terror? What is the war on terror? Some people hate you actually to say that. But what is the war on terror? Are these terrorists retaliating for what's been thrown at them for all these decades? Is that the only way they can find their way back? I'm not sure. I'm asking the question. I don't believe there's a war on terror. I don't believe there's a war on terror. I believe we are told there's a war on terror. But what is this war on terror? What actually is it? Strip it back. Strip it down. What is it? Yeah, okay. Oh, great. Well, you know, I think we should all go. I tell you, if my lads were going to Syria, if my 3 lads were going over there, I'd probably want to kill myself, never mind wait for them to be killed. I'd probably feel so strongly about it. Fighting what? I mean, we know how effective the first war after 9/11 was, do we not? And all the lies that were told about that. But some people will still say to you, I've got loads of American pals. And they say, oh yeah, God, you know, we got in there, we found these like weapons of mass destruction, blah, blah. I mean, what did they find? Like a catapult. There was nothing there. But they had solid proof that this stuff was there. It was absolutely solid proof. Why is that? It's all part to do with the colonisation of mankind, the colonisation of humankind, the consumption, the consuming, the all-consuming of every part of the world. It's just part of the zoomanic trance. Zoomanity rises, zoomanity falls. Zoomanity rises, zoomanity falls. I believe we live in a cycle of 300 years where everything falls and restarts. We also have what they call a moral reboot. A moral reboot, where it goes back to puritanism and clarity in everything. And then it begins to degrade again over a few hundred years. There's nothing new in that. So this war on terror, what is this war on terror? If we allow that stuff to keep coming into our minds, if we allow it to keep coming in, I mean, I don't know about you, but you know, when you see like these ISIS guys and they're cutting people's heads off and all that, I feel myself being sucked in, if I'm really honest, and saying we need to go over and kill those bastards. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. But then I have to say to myself, God, what are you saying? What are you saying here? Are you saying that war is okay? But how do you stop that stuff? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. How do you stop that stuff? For me, it's all a disgrace. The whole thing's a disgrace. But you have to reverse engineer every kind of everything to find out where it originates from. We took my daughter Lily to Milan, and we got the train down to Rome last year. It's been to Rome a few times. It's so beautiful. You can taste Rome. You can smell Rome. You can feel everything that's going on in Rome. It's such a wonderfully beautiful place. But the real question I always have in Rome is, does God really approve of this city? Is it God's city? Because they say it is. If you look at the history of Rome, Raphael and the other guys are all hired to create an illusion of heaven on earth. That's what they were paid for. They were to put angels here, cherubs there, stones here, godly visions here, paint the ceilings with everything, so that everybody thought, oh my God, God is here. But actually, is that true? Or is that another part of the zoomanic control, which we'll talk about in a second, which is one of the big threes we're not supposed to talk about? Religion. So we have to be in a position where we are honest with ourselves. Or do we? Most people just don't care. But the question is your life at a point where it should be? Are you happy with your life? Does your life feel good? Do you like everything that's happening around in your life? Because you cannot physically stand here and leave planet Earth. So you have to construct a life that suits you. This is your escape from the zoomanic structure of humanity. I'm not sure what's on these next. It's so interesting now, because we've got these, haven't we? And since we've got these, there is no escape. There is no escape. So how do you unplug from everything. Because everybody is plugged. Almost everyone is plugged. We went to watch John Cooper Clarke last week. He said, oh God, no, I've never had a mobile phone. I thought, there's something quite cool about that, not having a mobile phone. And he doesn't have a phone in his house. And he doesn't have a computer. And he doesn't have an iPad. And he doesn't have anything where you need to get in touch with people to say, John, you're playing in Hamburg tonight, we need to get you on a plane. You have to run around and go and find this guy. It's incredible. Really unplugged. I mean, I must admit, I'm pretty plugged in, but look at the stuff. You know, you've got TV, radio, social media. Think about this, right? Have you ever done this? Have you ever worked out how many hours you've been alive and estimated how many hours you have left? I've done that. And then when you think to yourself, okay, how much time did I spend on my computer today? 3 hours. Okay, so 3 hours times an extra 25 years. 3 hours times. And you realise, oh my God, I'm giving a massive chunk of my life to nothing. Like it, block it, share it, Twitter it, Facebook it. Why do we do that? Because Zoomanity knows that that's an addiction. And when we're addicted, when we're held in, we are part of the mass. And when you're part of the mass, it's hard to separate. And you will always move with the mass. And if you're within the mass, you're under control. And if you're under control, you're living in fear. What are those fears? I can't do that, I can't change, nothing can change. Social media, the web, phone, text, messaging, YouTube magazines, newspapers. It's all like, when we have the kids around my house, my eldest son's the worst. He has his laptop, his iPad, his phone, and he's gaming. Like, how the hell can he do that? And all my boys do exactly the same. Like we made a real big decision last year, and it was this. Well, I made the decision, and we're trying to stick to, which was, for 50 years I've been cooking my own breakfast. I'm not doing it again. I'm never ever cooking breakfast. So we try and go out for breakfast every single day, which actually, even in nowadays, it's not an easy thing to do, really. So you've got to change these things. But when you go to these places for breakfast, everybody is on a phone or an iPad, plugged in, connected in, trapped. Why is it called the web? Why is it called the web? So, in other words, what are we allowing into our minds on a daily basis? You know, your mind is a muscle. If you don't exercise your mind, you're completely screwed. If you allow anything and everything into your mind, you're in trouble. Have you seen anything so horrible? I mean, I have, especially with this kind of ISIS stuff. So horrible online, you're thinking about it for days after. You're thinking, oh God, why did I watch that? Why did it? When they brought the guy in the cage, I saw the video to a point. It was so horrendous. But even what was more horrendous, I watched it. Why did I allow that into my head? Crazy, really. But maybe it was curiosity, I'm not sure. Everything we allow into our mind will have an effect. There's nothing you can do to stop that. It will have an effect. It will definitely have an effect. A friend of mine years ago, he had an affair with this woman. I said, God, how did that happen? He said, well, we were working together, and she's always been there. I said, but I started looking at her even more. I said, well, why are we doing that? He said, well, God, she was so gorgeous, she would walk past, so boring at home, and before he knows it, he's sleeping with this woman. It was a complete disaster. Complete disaster. Because he allowed it into his mind on a daily basis. I have this really weird thing for salt and vinegar crisps. If I start to think about salt and vinegar crisps, I'll actually jump in the car and go and drive up and buy some. I'm almost salivating towards the end for these crisps. And she's gone, baby, you'd be fine, just have something. But I'm like, I need kettle crisps. So whatever you think about on a daily basis will have an effect on your mind. One thing I really believe is if we don't feed our brain, I tell you what, I first went to a gym when I was 47 years old. Never done a gym. When we used to do outdoor sports at high school, It was lucky really, because at the end with the farmer fields we had a ditch. And at the ditch when we used to do the cross country, there was a big concrete pipe went underneath. So me and John, we used to start the run, jump off, jump in the thing, jump underneath, sit in the ditch. John used to always have a fag, and I never smoked, but I would have a go at that time. Have a fag, say, oh, I think they're coming back now. So when they come back, we jump out and run the last 25 feet back into school. So I've never done fitness, so I thought a few years ago I'm going to really try and get fit, and last year I actually ran a 10k. Actually did a 10k at the Man City Stadium, and it was a 10k with 70 obstacles. This was in November. We had to swim across the canal. Me and Tamara did it. We had to swim across the canal, freezing. Oh my God! Talk about there was everything apart from ice on the canal. So it's incredible that you can do that at 52. I was happy to do it. But so in other words, you exercise your body to keep fit. And what I know now is after doing it for a few years, if I don't exercise, I'm almost like I'm getting really agitated. So the next day we go to the gym. So the gym 4 times a week, but the habit has now been formed. The brain's exactly the same. If you don't exercise your brain with something new every single day, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. Does Zoomanity ask you to exercise your brain, feed your brain, or input new things into your mind every day? No. Zoomanity is all about routine. It's all about staying within the rules. It's all about doing as you're told. You have an idea to do something new. People say, are you nuts? So what do you feed your brain every day? Boredom is a killer. It's an absolute killer for anyone. So really, you need to really possibly spend time cleaning your brain, get brainwashed, get clean. Because brainwash almost has the connotation that we are being poisoned or intoxicated with something that's bad for us. When actually, just think of the term brainwash. I'm cleaning my brain. That's what brainwashing is, surely. So Zoomanity does not want you to clean your brain, because you then start to pull away from the mass. So clean your brain. Do everything. I had a little experience in 2009, towards the end of a lot of the mess I've been going through. And I decided, I made a conscious decision to say the opposite to everything I usually say. So when I used to say no, I thought, I'm going to say yes. And when I used to say yes, I thought, I'll say no. And it took me down so many new paths and so many new routes. So for example, I went to New York on my own. And this guy said, this guy that I knew, I met him in New York, and he said, oh, I'm going to take you to this place, it'd be cool. I said, yeah, okay. And I'm thinking, I remember I've been going to bed at 11 o'clock for the past 30 years or whatever. So he said, what time shall I meet you? And he said, I'll meet you at midnight at the Empire State Building. I'm thinking. And I went, okay. Because I was thinking, God, midnight, it's really late in New York. Apart from that, I should be in bed. So I had all these things, really, truly, I had all these things going through my mind. Thinking I'm supposed to be in bed, I should be going out a minute. So we went out, went to this place, and we came back at 5 in the morning. I thought, God, that was really cool. I come in at 5 o'clock and I'm nearly 50. It was really cool. But the problem was then, I felt really bad about sleeping in the morning. I thought, God, I better get up at 9, I better go up at, half an hour at the very latest. Although I'd been up all night. So you see what happens, see how the conditioning works. See how the conditioning works for you in your life. You have to ask questions for yourself. Challenge everything and measure the outcome. Everything you say no to, say yes to, and see what happens. It may take you to the exact place that you want to be. If I hadn't done all the mad things that I've done the past 10 years, I wouldn't be with Tamara. And she's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. But if I hadn't gone down that route, what would have happened? I mean, I've never done languages at school. I'm now speaking one of the rarest languages on the planet, Georgia. I've never done languages at school. I never read anything at school. Never read all the Russian classics, the great Tolstoy. Went to Tolstoy's house in Moscow and so on and so on. So you have to challenge yourself. Because what happens is, when you do something new and you learn something new, there's something really exciting when you get into it. God, this is going to be really good. God, yeah, I'm learning French. Actually, we tried French lessons last year. It was a complete disaster. I think because the teacher she was chewing sausages in the class and stuff, cold sausages. She got my nerves a little bit. So, we have the three big drivers that we are not supposed to discuss. We have the three big things that Zoomanity tells us we're not to discuss. Now, when I trained as a hairdresser, they said to us, there's three things you never discuss with your clients, ever. You do not mention them, you do not bring it up, you do not discuss it. Sex, politics, religion. If you brought it up in the salon, ever, because I was always, even from a kid, I was always interested in religions. If you brought it up in the salon, people always go, well, actually, I'm going to Menorca. I said, well, you went to Menorca? I said, are you Catholic, Protestant, or Hindu? So people are terrified of those subjects. So in the salon, I have to be very, very careful talking about that stuff. And of course, as years have gone on, people are almost terrified of talking about religion. And possibly because more and more and more, we think we've discovered something new with a new kind of Dawkins-esque religion, the atheistic religion. I mean, you know, Socrates was talking about the atheists, Seneca was talking about all that stuff, this new spirituality and all that stuff that was taking place. You know, Marcus Aurelius in his meditations, he's talking about all these guys that are all taking place here, there, and everywhere. It's all cyclical. It all comes and goes. But in this generation right now, we think there is absolutely, without question, there's nothing. There's life and death, and that is it. But we don't really know, because nobody's started to come back and said it was really cool. Nobody's ever done that. So, for me, I mean, I'm always drawn towards religion because I have a big background in religion. But there's obviously different kinds of faiths. I mean, there's the... In fact, I think it did some... Oh no, we talked about sex first. So, okay, so sex. I mean, we all have fixed absolutes about sex. Everybody does. But the problem is within relationships, people get divorced because of sex. And why is that? Because we are told not to discuss sex. Yet people get divorced, or they have affairs, they see someone else. Sometimes, you know, you may have a friend, you may know someone who says, God, what happened? You know, why did your wife or your husband run off? And you say, well, to be honest with you, we hadn't had sex for 2 years. I said, well, did you not tell her or tell him? He said, well, there was a lot going on really, so I never mentioned it. So, the truth is, in the UK, and in some other countries, well, America definitely, we're very shy about things like sex. But actually, everybody has sex. There's not really a big secret about having sex. Everybody does it. It's just that we all pretend in the UK we don't. So, if people spoke more about sex and what they wanted from their relationships and had a more open discussion about sex, but Zoomanity is telling us no. Why is that? One of the biggest problems we're having now with young kids is sex online. Because what's happened is, sex used to be part of a relationship, but sex has now become like a treat, it's become like a little meal, it's become like a little something you can have in your own time. Is that right or wrong? I don't know, I'm just questioning it. Is it right to teach our children that, yeah, you know, like the other week I found a load of condoms in my son's room. One of my boys lives with me. I thought, oh my God, loads of condoms. Like, oh, I didn't really know what to think, so I thought, shall I confront him, So I just shut the drawer in the end. But really, we spoke in the end about it. We did speak in the end. But really, do we really talk about that subject as open as we should do? What's it got to do with anyone else if he's just married him or she's just married her? It's got nothing to do with anyone. The only thing you have to be careful of is you, nothing else. But the zoomanic structure tells us that we should be involved in everyone else's life. We should be saying, have you heard what's going on with Dave? Have you heard what's going on? Who gives a damn? You've got to say the French have it right at some level. They're always having sex with loads of women, so what? The French don't care. Well, you know, there's a brilliant talk just gone online from Monica Lewinsky. You watch her TED talk. It's just brilliant. Just watch her TED talk that's just gone online. really, really good. Because actually, you see the perspective of it. I mean, oh my God, there's nothing new in what she had done or what happened. So we're going to have to just really move through this. And again, politics, you know, we've got our own personal general election on its way. But the reality is, the older you get, the more you see in politics, and the more lies and hypocrisy, and the more fools you see leading the mass. So politics at one time, when it was less diluted, was more about taking control of the country, because the country